again, thank you for joining us today. Today is that racist organization's big sports event, but today is also Black Love Day. And as we all know, tomorrow is Valentine's Day. And so it's very fitting that we welcome our guests today, Melvin, Doctors Melvin and Sherrie Allen, who have over 50 years of personal growth and development training. And they are going to share their techniques, philosophies around love, personal relationships, as well as self-love, and as well as cultural love among Black people. And so it is my honor and pleasure to welcome Doctors Melvin and Sherrie Allen.
Yay. Hi, Sharon.
Hey.
Thanks for inviting us on your platform. I feel honored.
Thank you for this lovely book. I don't know if people can see it well. The first question that I like to know, and I read your book, but for the sake of those who might not know your work, what brought you to focus on relationships?
Yes.
What were you doing before you joined forces, and what led you both to say, you know what, let's do this, let's do relationships, because whatever?
Well, I think most people read the book. I'll go first, Melvin. Most people, if people have read the book, our full story is in the book. But from my point of view, Melvin is my second husband, and my first marriage didn't work out. I was young when I got married, 21. I come from a traditional family of if you're going to have sex or be intimate with a man, he needs to be your husband. And I also am from Chicago, we both are, and I wanted to move away, to leave home. And my mother was like, there's no way you're leaving home without being married to someone. So my first husband, he's since passed away after we were divorced, but that marriage didn't work out and it was very painful. I'm an ISFJ, we'll get into it, but one of the commitments I have is partnering and having it be blissful and perfect. And I'm an idealist. And so when it didn't work out, for me, that actually threw me on my spiritual path. And so I was like, Lord, it was very painful, the divorce. And I said, Lord, if it's your will for me to be married in this lifetime, then choose my mate. Now I had to do a lot of work, landmark education, a lot of reading books. And I put it all in the book. But I became my best self. That term came along later, but when I look back, I was committed to becoming my best self, so I would attract my best self. So in attracting Melvin, and I think we were in Atlanta, we got together, and once we realized that we were going to get married, my minister, she was a unity minister, she said, Sherrie, if you and Melvin are going to take on marriage, for me, she didn't use the term woke, but she was saying, you guys are two woke individuals. And how can you do it differently so you could be not a role model, but that you can model what it takes to be in partnership with another human being and do it so that it works. And so every day for me, it's an experience, it's an opportunity, so then that led me to, well, why don't we take this on? Allison Armstrong's, it's a program celebrating men satisfying women. And in doing her work, I realized that it was something I'd like to do with my partner. I hadn't met Melvin at the time, but I had an intention to put out a body of work that would make a difference and be a possibility for people being in partnership together and having it work. Yeah, and keeping it real on what it takes to be in a relationship with another human being, as well as yourself, and have it work. So that's what led me to the relationship business. Yeah.
Wonderful. Melvin, how about you?
Well, I have a different story. See, I believe in, someone told me, says there's a couple ways you can listen to experts. One, for people who have life experiences, people who've read all the books, and people who teach. So I've been blessed to be able to say I fit in all three categories because the Hard Knocks of Life taught me a lot about relationships. I thought, so I've been married 4 times. This is my 4th marriage. So after getting married the first time, which lasted 3 months, and I have shoes older than that, the second one was 3 years, and I don't know, like really like how that happened. And then the third time I got married, I was married 10 years. First time, 3 months, second time, 3 years, third time, 10 years. And then after the third time, I was really standing in front of the house and just wondering, like, God, what is it? And what am I supposed to do with my life? And he says, well, you stand in water, you got sugar on your left, and you got you got sugar and lemons on your right. Make lemonade. And then I realized something that I had come together. I used to be an art dealer in New Jersey, and I used to do home shows like Tupperware. I would go out and do home shows, but they were always women. Very seldom men would come. And I did that for over 20 years, every weekend going out to do home shows. And every conversation I would have with the clients after we got to know each other, it was about, why does my husband do this? And why does my boyfriend do this? And where are all the nice guys? And it's always revolved around relationships. So I was the only guy in the room, and I was the one who was friendly and able to talk to. So these women would tell me all about these different problems and challenges that they had. And I realized that, the common denominator in all those failed relationships was me. I made the decisions. I married those women, and I went through all that grief. So complaining about all of it and making myself a victim, and just think about it. You don't go around telling everybody, hey, y'all, I want to be in a relationship, but I've been married 4 times. Like, nobody wants to listen to you. It's like, obviously, if you didn't get it right, why should you? So when I realized it was all about me, then I started to say, I'm going to take on understanding women and understanding in relationships to maybe see how I could have made a mistake. And if I'd had a Melvin and Sherrie around, I'd probably still be married to the first wife. But I didn't know what to do, how to do it. I thought, I'm not crazy, and therapists are for people. So I didn't do anything. So I had even gone to the extent of doing projects where I had created a dating game show for women. And I had like 5 women. I had more than that, but I had 5 guys or 6 guys, and the women chose the guys. Instead of the men choosing the women, I had the women choose the guys, and I had games and prizes and limousines, and had all these people there. Like, I think it was probably 75 people in a nightclub, and I raised the money. I got the money and gave it to a battered women's shelter as part of a project that I was doing. So I've always felt that, being a single father for 7 years by myself, going up to after school night, back to school nights, and going to PTA meetings. I was the only guy, especially Black guy, going to all these meetings. They're going like, what's going on? I said, I don't get it. And so I got into Boy Scouts because my son, and it kept going. And I was always surrounded by women, and I was always fascinated with the challenges they had to go through. Because after you go on a bus trip with 50 women going to Disneyland from New Jersey and hear about all the challenges, and I'm going like, wow. I started to really hear their pain and suffering, and the single fathers, and it was just horrible. And then being a single father, I often got the chance to really see how difficult it was being a single parent. That process, I tell people, it was not failures. They were really learning opportunities for me to really pay attention to what was going on. So when I met Sherrie and she started talking about relationship business, and I was going like, oh, that's interesting. And then I moved from New Jersey to California and did not have a nickel, didn't have any future, didn't have a job, didn't have anything I could call career. And I moved from the art business out here, and I had gone to coaching school over 20 some odd years ago. And I decided to use the coaching as my new career, and to have that be California Melvin as compared to New Jersey Melvin. And when I put that together, then Sherrie started talking about celebrating men, and blah, 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 with Alison Armstrong. And then that's when she was saying that the relationships, I'm going like, I can see an opportunity for us to be able to put something together from a business point of view that would, help them, guide them. And then so one thing led to another, and we saw that there was a connection between the relationship business and me looking for something to do, and her love for relationships. And so we decided that we could put something together to make it work. Went to school, learn this, learn that, blah, 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 blah. And we created what we have now.
I want to focus on the Allen method. So step one, step one is 3 commitments: being committed to your relationship, being committed to communicate with each other, and being committed to resolve conflicts satisfactorily, right? Step 2 is co-creating a spiritual partnership, which is interesting to, I don't think in the history of sort of the relationship niche or business, spiritual relationship is not necessarily something that's even included in how people are coached. Step 3 is what you call your secret sauce, Myers-Briggs, understanding personality types. And type 4 is staying on the path of love, being mindful. Why did you feel that those 4 steps are the keys? And we're going to talk about Myers-Briggs after this, but what is it about those 4 steps that you think are the crucial, overarching things that people need to keep in mind in relationship?
Well, Sharon, we're going to keep it real, okay?
Of course.
We said 4 steps. We could have said 30 steps, okay? But we were like, okay, how do we distill this to get this book done? And what do we focus on in terms of at least have these things? Okay, so it's like you could use more, but at least these 4 steps. That's where we're coming from my point of view. Melvin can say something else. So when we looked at step 1, we were like, okay, so if you're not committed, like committed to the relationship, committed to your ability to show up in the relationship, your ability to communicate, don't even bother, because one has to be committed first. And when we talk about commitment, we're talking about committed no matter what, in it to win it, close all doors. Whatever is going to come up in this relationship, we're going to get through this together. Because when people are not committed, in my experience, they don't show up. Their true self doesn't show up because, there's always a cut and run. And what I've learned in working with couples and singles and human beings in general, we are committed until you piss me off, until I'm no longer wanting to be in a relationship with you, until it's no longer fun, until I don't see a vision. So the commitment is first, right? And then after there's the commitment, now the communication. How do you learn how to communicate? We use the word communicate, but really what works when you are in relationship with people you care about, it requires a dialogue. And so that's taken from Helen and Harville Hendricks' work. And so a dialogue means the person shows up to mirror you, meaning they don't add, nor do they take away what the communication is. Because sometimes when we're talking to someone, we want to spin it so it's in our favor, rather than just really having your partner feel witnessed and seen. So when we're talking about communication, we're talking about a dialogue where you feel seen and heard and witnessed, and so does your partner. And it requires slowing down and really being present to what you are saying. Because what gets couples in trouble is what gets said, being irresponsible in what you're saying, and then how it lands. And most people are talking about the delivery rather than the actual message. So if the delivery is, I say systematized, like really laid out in terms of a dialogue, let me see if I got you. I heard you say, did I get that? I imagine you might be feeling. So that kind of communication. And then the last one, what was the other communication? Melvin to go on. And the commitment to the relationship and conflict resolution, always and forever. As long as we are in relationship with any other being, anything, there will be conflict. And so my experience is people have it like, if we're having conflict in our relationship, something's wrong. So in our work, we help normalize conflict. That's part of it. That's the journey. That also relates to the spiritual partnership, because a spiritual partnership is a dynamic relationship. It has the tension. So I'll stop there and allow Melvin to.
Yeah, so for me, the commitment is the foundation. It is, without the commitment, the rest of it doesn't work. if I was 100% committed to any of those previous marriages, I would still be there. I always believe that the marriage vow is like, to death do us part. It should be until you piss me off. Because when you get pissed off, that's when you're going like, this ain't working for me. So we looked at the 3 C's and said, if we had to do it all over, what would be the 3 key ingredients that we know that you could not afford to, like a triangle, a leg, you couldn't afford to leave one out. If you're not committed, then why bother to begin with? And commitment doesn't mean that like you stay there, and you're miserable. It means that you're really committed to the relationship as compared to your partner. Because when you're committed to the relationship, it's like having a baby. If the baby is sick and you got to go to the emergency room, you just get up and you take the baby to the emergency room. You don't think about it's your turn or like, I don't want to go, it's too late. You just get up and do what you have to do. Sometimes in the ebb and flow of relationships, one person is feeling it, the other person is not. And the person that's feeling it's got to be strong enough to say, we're going to get through this. We have a conscious couples community. And one of the guys at the last meeting, we have an exercise where you look into each other's eyes and you hug each other for 1 minute every day. And then she was busy and she was doing things, very successful, PhD and all that. And she said, okay, I got to do this homework. Okay. And she ran over. She said, okay, give me my hug so I can go back to work. And he looked at her and says, don't sell out on us. Mm-hmm. And she changed her attitude and her whole physical being to a point that she was so touched by her husband saying, don't sell out on us. And if we have 1 minute, I want this to be a minute where we connect and we really like grounded in our relationship and share our love for each other for just 1 minute and nothing else matters. She changed her attitude. That kind of commitment might come from your partner, but both of you, it's like somebody's got to be committed to make it to win. So when you have the commitment, you realize that, you might have some bad days and some up days, but you get through things. And that's part of the relationship journey. I don't know if you're talking, but it's part of the journey everybody goes through. You cannot skip anything. You're going to go through stages. And if you can understand the stages, then it gives you power. Because if you don't know what you don't know, you're just thinking this is crazy. We're here to say, taking the lid off the pot and let the water boil. All relationships are difficult, not some, all relationships. So Dr. Melvin has this thing that, it doesn't make any fish, which fish you put out of the barrel, they're all slippery. So you don't care who you pick, it's going to be some work to do. Mm-hmm. And if you don't find somebody where there's work to be done, and what George Patton said, if we both look alike, we both act alike, one of us is not necessary. If we both think alike, we both act alike, one of us is not necessary. It's that conflict resolution that Sherrie's talking about, where you bump into each other, and you part of that alchemical process is to molding, yourself from like you get to the diamond, but the diamond's got to be cut, and the diamond's got to be polished. That's work. It's not just pick the diamond off the ground and you walk into Tiffany's and say, put a band around it. There's a process you go through. So that alchemical process forces a lot of pressures on each person, but you got to be committed to stay in it. You can't just decide, I don't want to be bothered. And if you don't want to do that, then forget it. And how can you resolve any conflict if you can't communicate? If you can't communicate, then you can't resolve any conflicts. And every relationship has conflicts. It's how you resolve the conflicts that really determines a high degree of satisfaction and happiness. When you're in a relationship with someone where you're in constant conflict and you can't resolve it, where does that energy go? Where does the tension go? How is happiness? What happiness? When you're in a conflict, it's like, it's me or you. One of us is going and I'm taking you out. And then you get into the argument, but you're not trying to resolve the conflict. Conflict is an opportunity to take your relationship to the next level. And I'm not suggesting, because this is not about a romantic relationship between a man or a woman this is for human beings. All kids, mother, sister, brother. If you got a conflict and you don't resolve it, it's like the dead fish sitting in the corner. It starts to smell and you don't know what you're going to do with it. But sooner or later, you have to address it. So if you can address it, then you can move forward. If you don't address it, it doesn't go well. And the spiritual partnership is part of this whole understanding that we're not in a relationship to make each other happy. Maybe we're in a relationship to help each other grow, to get through life together for the highest and best means possible for both of us, and not just one of us. So those 3 C's, communication, conflict resolution, and continue, of those things we felt were part of the foundation. That we can't get past that, then why do the rest of it?
But let me add this with commitment. Where we're speaking from is Goethe's quote, until one is committed, there's always hesitancy, a chance to draw back, all of inefficiency, blah, blah, blah. And so we're saying that if you look in your life where you have been committed, then providence, as they say, moves too. Everything aligns itself to support you in that goal or that intention. But it starts with that level of commitment. Yeah.
So you focused on the 3 C's. The 4th thing is the Myers-Briggs. And like most things in this country that have become useful in this country, the beginnings of the test, or the origins, should I say, were not as honorable as people who utilize them. So for those who don't know, there's some history, and I'll add the link to the chat if I can safely maneuver without knocking myself out of Zoom. But you can certainly Google the history of Myers-Briggs. The intention when it was first devised was about reinforcing ideas of racial superiority, where, of course, people of color were inferior and white people were superior. What about the test as it has evolved since that do you find useful? Because as you mentioned in your book, almost every Fortune 500 company uses some version of it. What is it about Myers-Briggs or some sort of understanding of personality do you all find useful and valuable?
I'm gonna let Sherrie go first, but you don't have enough time for us to talk about that one. That's a woo-wee. Okay, Sherrie, what do you want? You want to go first?
Well, the origin, Catherine Briggs, or Isabel Myers, however they are. I don't focus on them and the racist stuff that associated with them. It's kind of like, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And so we learned about Myers-Briggs in grad school at Pacifica. We were attending a seminar, just kind of moseyed by. A friend of mine, Dr. Gina, and I moseyed by. And then when we were doing our field work, Melvin's friend, Heidi, my friend too, she had us learn about the long version of Myers-Briggs and the opportunity. And so everybody's interested in themselves, right? So we went and learned about that. And what we saw was it was a really great, use it as a tool to help couples and people understand their personality and the behavior behind their personality. When Melvin and I were first married, I was very much in his world of extroversion and almost selling out on the part of me that needs to be introverted, to go within, to reflect, to process, to be alone. And so once I was able to see that, oh, he's an extrovert, then we were able to make some adjustments in our relationship, because I thought this relationship is not going to work if I had to continue to be that level of extroverted energy. But what we learned in working with our clients, when people are in pain, they don't care what tool you have. Just get them out of the ditch, get them out of the pain, whatever it takes. And what we learned is people truly appreciated understanding the behavior behind the personality type and understanding that it's not personal, because we do, as human beings, we take things personally, especially if someone is what is perceived to be stepping on my toes or disrespecting me or putting me on the spot. And so when you understand the behavior behind the personality, again, you don't take it personally. And what we say is most times when relationships don't work, it's not the person, it's the personality. So, I mean, we've really had, and we use Myers-Briggs, like they take a long form, 17-page form that helps you understand not only are you an extrovert, but the kind of extrovert you are. Like I'm an introvert. I'm also a receiving introvert. So you won't have me at any party saying hello to people or being on the welcome committee, but I'll be someone who, if people end up in my little camp, they'll have a great time because we'll have a beautiful discussion. And as an introvert, we're not going to talk about the weather or where you work or what you do for a living. We're going to talk about your life. See, introverts, we like to dive deep.
Judging from the questions you asked me before we,
Exactly.
I was like, oh, sure, okay, yeah. Yes, you like to know, sure. And I'm an introvert too, so I get it.
Yeah. So we've been able to use Myers-Briggs as a tool to help people understand their personalities. And again, Myers-Briggs is not, I call it an assessment, not a test. And it's not used to discriminate. It really is used to bring clarity to who's on the team. And one of the things Melvin and I talk about is a marriage or a relationship is a team. So who's on the team and who does what best?
And so for me, I'm a master Myers-Briggs practitioner. And the simplest way to kind of give you a comparison is that I'm on the Myers-Briggs website as considered one of the experts. And they're like, last I looked, they're usually like somewhere between 20 to 25 Myers-Briggs master practitioners listed for the state of California. There are only like 240 the last time I checked, Canada and the United States and Mexico. So when you get to the master practitioner level, you take a lot more courses you have to do. It's like, it's next to the PhD. This is probably the most ridiculous thing I've had to do. It's a lot of work. But when you get there, you start to really understand. And for me, I didn't care if they called it, Myers lunch bucket. All I wanted to know was what kind of tool can I have to help them see the unconscious? And since we're depth psychologists, it's not what we see up top on the surface, it's what's below the surface. What is it that we don't know that we don't know? Where are our blind spots? So using that Jung, unconscious aspect and looking at the shadows, Myers-Briggs gave us a format to be able to look at people's shadows and their opposites and their blind spots. So when we're able to shine light on people's blind spots and they can actually see like, oh, yeah, I am the person who gets to the party last. Oh, I'm not as organized as I would like to be. Oh, I do wait to the last minute to get reports done. Then you start to have a way of speaking to that person to be able to have them hear you, because all of a sudden you can relate to where they're coming from and you can kind of go, yeah, okay. So in relationships, we say without any hesitation whatsoever, people don't have a clue how difficult relationships are. And that's why the divorce rate is like around a little less than 50%. The people who get married the first time and get married the second time is 67% failure rate. And if you get married the third time, you crazy. You're up to almost 90% failure rates because you have a baked way and consciousness of this is the way it's supposed to be. And you don't look at your blind spots and you just keep doing the same thing over. But typically what we find is that we are attracted to opposite personality types. So regardless of your personality, most times, we haven't found it not to be consistent yet, we are attracted to people who are not like us. And then you wonder why there's a conflict, because you don't see the world the same way, you don't make decisions the same way, you don't carry out those decisions the same way. And then you're wondering what's wrong with your partner because they're not performing to your standards. And then you get upset and start questioning, and you go back and forth. And Myers-Briggs was the tool that allowed us to say, take this assessment. Now, we deal with black, white, heterosexuals, gays, transgender. We have dealt with everything. And Myers-Briggs has consistently been the tool that has been able to show our clients their blind spots and where they're struggling. And being able to see that what you are good at is probably what your partner is bad at. And then the two of you are trying to work it out. First thing, the number one reason people get divorced, Sharon, is money. When the money's funny, somebody's out the door. I got to go. I ain't gonna sit up here and sleep on the street. No, if you got to work this out, I'm out. Have a great life. I'm not going with you. And the second one is sex. And when sex is not working, I'm gonna get it from you. I'm gonna get it from somewhere else, but I'm gonna get it from somewhere. And so therefore, you go do the other thing. The third one is family and friends. When you can use Myers-Briggs and start to see where you have conflict in your ability to communicate, because one person is analytical and the other person is emotional. When a person is emotional and they're yelling and screaming, it's for a reason. They're not yelling and screaming because they love it. Usually they're trying to yell and scream for their sanity or for their survival. And you usually marry, that person usually marries or partners with someone who looks at you like, I hope they stop this yelling and screaming soon because this is driving me crazy. I'm not willing to put up with this. And if they're going to keep doing this, I'm out of here. So those two different types get together, and then they wonder why they don't see the world the same way. They're different types. Myers-Briggs is an assessment. It's not a test. And what you do, what you learn is that you don't tell somebody this is your type. Step one is you take the assessment. Step two is there's a verification process where you go back to the client and you say, you tell me, does this assessment work? I don't, you tell me all the questions you answered, does this represent who you are? And if it doesn't, you take it again and you make some assessments. I don't think I've had to do that. One time, maybe I had to redo it, but all the times it's like, do you see yourself as being this? They validate it. So it's not about me saying you are, it's about you taking responsibility, being able to have ownership and saying, yes, this is me. Now, once a person says, okay, this is me, then we can do our work and we can take it apart and add things to it. But this is not and for you, I had another question about that is never, ever, ever supposed to be used for promotions or hiring practices. That's anybody that's gone through Myers-Briggs training. It's like, this is not that. It is a matter of, you have a preference. Do you want, if I throw a ball up, would you catch it with your right hand or would you catch it with your left hand? The hand that you're most comfortable with, that's the hand you're going to use. The part about Myers-Briggs, what you're most comfortable expressing and the way you show up naturally, that's what you're going to do. That doesn't mean you can't catch the ball with your other hand. It just means you have a preference for showing up in a particular way. And once you understand how you show up, then you can understand why if somebody shows up opposite of you, there's going to be a conflict. Now, how much opposite? And so when we were at Pacifica, and one of the professors was asked the question, well, if that's the case, then how opposite are you supposed to be? What do you say, Sherrie?
As opposite as you can stand it.
That's hard to swallow.
What's
as
interesting
opposite as you can stand it.
A number of years ago, I was at Mass, and I remember the priest saying, I mean, he wasn't apologizing. He was sort of confessing. He said, I am partly responsible for making the church a museum. And by that, and he explained what he meant by that. He was talking about marriage, in that the sort of work that I guess you're supposed to do in premarital, all that premarital spiritual counseling, most priests don't do, or whatever the process is not adequate. And so they know that they just get people married who they know have no business getting married, who they know are not compatible or not ready, mature, maturity wise, but they just do it, for whatever reason, they just, okay, get married. Either they fall in line with but we've already bought the dress or whatever it is. He said too many priests do that and do not really make couples go through this process of self-knowledge and communication that's required. So you all are doing more of a service than our spiritual, our spirit. And I would venture to say that that's not just Catholicism, that's many denominations. I have friends who talk about their, spiritual mentors. And so religion, organized religion, is not helping us become these more self-aware, more mature in how we interface with each other. And so that brings me to the cultural aspect. Before we kind of go through and identify and talk about what you identify as the course of relationship, how can we sort of translate some of these things, these skills, these steps of growth how can we apply them socially and culturally? Because we are at a place right now where without communication, without conflict resolution that's adequate, without cultural self-knowledge, we're going to be in trouble. I mean, we're already, kind of careening down the slope right now. Where do you see us being more effective in applying these tools, developing this muscle socially, so that we can really begin to heal the soul of our culture?
So first of all, I have yet to find anyone to defy this one. We did not go to school for relationship training in high school, grammar school, or college. We watched our parents, we watched television. Culture told us what we think is a relationship, and then we live into the fantasy of thinking that's it, and it's not realistic. And so when you really get to the real world and really find out what relationships about, it's you like me, I like you, or we're in love, and then down the road you go. If you start off right, you might end up right. But if you start off wrong, why do you think the divorce rate is almost 50%? You wouldn't buy a car if they told you it was going to break 50% of the time. If your phone was going to break 50% of the time, you get another phone. So we don't have the skills and the tools we need to really transform relationships. And I don't think we ever really have. And that's one of the reasons we do what we do. And to really bring people consciousness to the fact that, we really don't know how to do this. It's a slippery slope. And most of us are base our decisions on our emotions. And here we go. But, we don't know how to do this. That's why we're failing so bad.
Now, I am an idealist, so I just feel like the people that are on this platform, they have a level of awareness. I think the world is changing. We're moving into the age of Aquarius. So a lot of people are moving into coming from a heart place, inclusivity, including everybody. But with that being said, it's an inside job. So it's every individual doing their own work, coming into awareness, waking up, and taking 100% responsibility for how they show up in their relationship with themselves, and then in relationships with another person. And it's easy for people to play the victim, and I'm not trying to play the hard, but we do. It's easier for us to play the victim or the martyr or the innocent even in relationships. And try to make it about another person. But it really is, at the end of the day, it's about how much you love yourself. And in loving yourself and making right choices for yourself, not easy, then you have the capacity to open up, to include someone else and love someone else. It's an inside job.
Can you both sort of amplify? So for example, Sherrie, your doctoral work was around Black women in rage. Melvin, your doctoral work was around the fantasy that many, particularly Black women, are fed through whatever, form of media we're ingesting. I think you focused on Motown, I believe, right?
Yep.
Right. So let's say the relationship is Black people versus whomever, the police, or Black people versus Hollywood, but how can we get to those markers of developing satisfactory communication, commitment? What was the other one? Communication, commitment,
Conflict resolution. When
it seems like the other side is never coming honestly. The other side seems to always be looking for a way to avoid actually being honest. And, for example, last summer, every company and individuals had, their little black square, Black Lives Matter. Soon as the conflict took too long, people started losing interest. And Black people are sitting there saying, but we're still, Black people are saying we need something. And people with the wherewithal to assist in that are not on the same page. How can we, people who feel whether it's Black people or women, how can the people who feel the least empowered continue in relationship with people or organizations, entities with more power to get to a real place? Because we just keep going in circles culturally.
I mean, I'm sitting with what you're saying, Sharon, because what I'm hearing you say is around Black and white relationships, but it also would include Hispanic and Black relationships, or Asian and or just and not just like centering just Black folks. I mean, I think people in general, everybody's having some feeling of feeling other or diminished or marginalized. So what I'm hearing you say is, how do we take like an instrument or a tool like Myers-Briggs and bring it into the larger society as a way to bring clarity in how to communicate?
Not just Myers-Briggs, but your entire sort of philosophy of how to realize strong relationships.
But again, I have to say it starts with self. Okay, so then that would look like, how do we mobilize? First of all, how do you take 100% responsibility again for your part? And not come from a place of feeling victimized or marginalized. I mean, even if it's there in the beginning, to kind of move past it with a real intention. So it would be about setting an intention, like, what's your intention? And I can see even revisioning, because Bell Hooks talks about that we might have to it would behoove us to revision how we show up in the world and with other communities, what the intention is, what our commitment is, to move past these old stories and narratives around feeling victimized or othered. So it would be really self-empowerment, taking responsibility, like nobody's coming. We're it.
I love that. Nobody's coming. I love it. I love it. And so there's a lot of assent in the chat. Oh, yes, there's some meat in that statement. Woo, we want to play the role of victim or innocent. Woo. So yes. Go ahead, Melvin. I'm sorry.
I wanted to say that when I started my dissertation, my chair, Nuria, said, why would you want to write a dissertation about women? You will never understand women because you're not a woman. And to take on something, why don't you take on something, more, like you can get your hands around. I think this will get the wrong subject. And I often wondered how I got myself in the process of writing a dissertation, which was the unconscious impact of Motown music on the psyche of African-American women. And I had 2 field studies I had to do before starting the dissertation. One was on the state of Black relationships from a male perspective, and the challenges women have to endure in relationships was the second one. So when I listened to them and I was interviewing them and I was talking about life and history and so forth, and what do you remember? When I got to the 60s, they all seemed to light up and start talking about, oh, the 60s, that was the greatest time, and blah, 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 blah. And then they started talking about Motown. Some of the women cried. And I'm going like, Motown? Cry? What? And I couldn't understand that. And then I was looking at the guys and they were, oh, yeah, this was. But then I realized that was a crucial moment that I say, was the beginning of the single professional woman. I have my car, I have my career, I have my condo, and I don't need a man. My mother told me to go to school, get a job, and make sure that I could take care of myself and never depend on a man. Well, I found out that the women who said that were women who grew up in the 60s, and they used Motown music as training material to tell them and have them understand what love was supposed to be like. And if you drill down deep, your grandmother didn't tell her, the mother didn't tell them about the birds, the bees, and this is what you think, because basically they came from barefoot and pregnant, and they didn't have a job, they didn't have credit, they were a wife or a partner, and they had more kids than they wanted, and they had to stay home and take care of kids. They had no self-expression. They had no ability to take care of themselves, and they suffered from that. And as soon as things got to a point where they had daughters, they said, don't do what I did. Go to school, get an education, and make sure you can take care of yourself. And that single professional woman went towards being self-realized, making money, and it exceeded the men. and making sure that they could do that. And then relationships took a different turn. At the same time, birth control showed up. So now I don't have to get pregnant like my mother did. I have some choice in about it. Now there's free love. So it's not just about men. I have some, so all of these things happen at the same time. And in the 60s, the music was actually training material for these women. And then a lot of the women I interviewed, not a lot, but several of the women married men who are like Marvin Gaye, who happened to be their childhood idol, who thought that was the epitome of Billy D. Williams. That was the epitome, and it was tall, he was light, he had straight hair, I'll take him. And then the songs that were really being sung was songs really like, Donna Ross and the Four Tops, all of those artists in Motown were
Marvin
singing
Gaye.
songs about despair and like, oh, baby, I'll do anything. My girl, I'll die for you. That was so unrealistic. But if you're a young girl, a teenager, and you fantasize that this is what love is about, and everybody's singing and everybody's dancing, you go out looking for that. And what they did is they went out looking for love in all the wrong places, and they going like, that didn't work. That didn't work. And so they started doing that. And the last thing is that African-American women of color, are the only ones that are like, got to deal with sexism and racism. So men don't have to deal with the sexism, but they got to deal with the sexism and the racism. And that is a tremendous amount of pressure to have as just period in this culture. So to really have this be something that make a difference for other people, first of all, it's an inside job. When you start with you, then you can do better. But if you don't know who you are and you don't know what makes you tick, it makes it very difficult for you to make somebody else happy when you don't know what makes you happy. How can you ask for something you don't know you need? And you typically run away from people who are not like you. You want people to agree with you. And if you had bad experiences growing up in a single parent home or divorce or, people fighting, then that's the relationship training that you gain. And that's what you see. So a lot of the men who grew up in families where they grew up by their mother, always in the clients, there's always seemed like there's something missing that they feel that they didn't get because daddy wasn't home. This makes them almost feel like they're incomplete and they're trying to be a man. But all of that stuff comes in. And then you have the women trying to like keep the family together for slavery and doing everything and turn themselves into pretzels to try to make it work and be nurturing. And, that's not, so it's very difficult for African Americans and people of color to work out relationships because we sometimes bring $27,000 last time I looked was the average wedding. That's a lot of money. What would you do if you could spend that money in personal growth and development and making sure that you had the right tools or compatibility traits to make sure that you understand the kind of person that would probably, not guaranteed, but probably be a compatible person that you can have a relationship with that would turn out to be long term, if that's what you're looking for. We don't do that. So I'm going to teach you, you're going to teach me, and somebody's going to teach it, and it keeps going on and on and on and on. But regardless of how we get away from gravity, you are the most important person in the formula. Everybody that comes in our life is passing through. Our mothers, our parents, our partners, our teachers, passing through. You're the only one that's going to be there at the end saying, to the end, and nobody jumps in with you. So if this is your life, you really got to like work it out for yourself. Like it's the inside job, and it really is your responsibility to find out who you are and to make the wise decisions, because if you don't make that decision, unfortunately, somebody else is going to make it for you, and then you're going to complain about it.
And so that's interesting because I could apply that culturally as well. The same way, Melvin, you said, women have to deal with sexism and racism. I see African Americans having to deal with two issues as well. We have to deal with racism and how to relate to others who oppress us. But that oppression has also, and the history of that oppression has also, we still don't really know ourselves as a culture. We're still having these arguments among us about what it is to be Black. And we don't even realize sometimes the internalized self-loathing or the internalized racism that has made us forget who we are culturally, what is the quality that you think in all of your work that we still need to do some work there? And where have you seen growth and promise?
I'd have to take it to awareness, mindfulness, the willingness to know thyself and to thine own self be true. And if we could teach, and I think they're doing it because they are teaching mindfulness in various places, Weight Watchers, the VA, some schools, but it really is one waking up to one's own nature, one's own self, because I think what we do is we project our pain and suffering and our upset on culture, on other people. That whole black-white stuff, I'm going to just make it very simple, but I think it's just projections. And so, I mean, that's a whole other show, right? But it really is just one becoming mindful of one's own self and what matters to oneself. So it's mindfulness for me and self-love. It's always back to over here.
Wow.
Melvin.
We didn't talk about this, but I totally agree. It's all about you. You are, like I said earlier, you are the common denominator in everything you do. It can't be out there. It can't be someone else. You have to really be able to be responsible for your choices. Why did you pick that? Because I picked that. You know, and if you can be responsible for your choices, it is power in being able to say, I wasn't influenced by someone. Someone didn't tell me. It's not my fault. It's like, no, I chose that. And I'm doing it because this is what I want. To do that type of work, to really develop the awareness and the mindfulness of where you are. Part of the book is like there's an assessment in there. Where are you mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, financially? Partnership is a level of awareness. And if you're mindful of where you are, you probably can say, oh yeah, as far as spirituality. But it's a whole, you know, it's like a balance, a wheel of life. It's not just I make money. It's like, are you, you know, self-care. If you can take care of you, just when you're on the plane and they give you the little speech and they say that when the mask comes down, you don't put it on the people sitting behind you. You put it on you, the baby sitting next to you, and they say, oh, I got to put it on the baby. You know, okay. You put it on you. It's always you. And to the degree that you love yourself, you won't allow people to take advantage of you. To the degree that you're conscious of who you are and your choices and what makes you work, you become a very powerful person because no one can shake that. And it's not your mother's fault. It's not your sister's fault. It's not your husband's fault. You are responsible for you because if they died, then now, well, who are you going to blame? It really is an inside job. And it's all about you being able to take responsibility for where you are. Now, you don't know, then your job might be in this lifetime to find out what you can find out to the best of your ability to become more conscious about who you are on this journey in life. You got to come back another lifetime, or you got to read about it in heaven. But this lifetime, you only have a certain amount of time. And I can't think of another investment, I don't care what it is, that's better than you. Because if you have the money, you got the house, you got the woman, you got the car, but it's still you. And so to the degree that you can't love yourself, how can you walk down the street feeling beautiful, whatever that means? Doesn't mean that you got to be a size 6 and, you know, and look like a particular way because society says that. It's because it's an inside job. And what's on the inside comes out on the outside. I don't care if you're fat and ugly. A beautiful person is a beautiful person, not because of the physical, it's because of who they're being. And that beaming light just radiates in the universe and has it stand out in such a way that people see you and recognize you. But that's you doing the work. It's not somebody saying, I'm going to anoint you as being a shining star. You got to do the work. And maybe that's our job. And from that, light attracts light. So you love yourself. People who love you can respond to you. But if they don't love themselves, that's not a fit. If I love myself and you don't love yourself, sorry, you're not a fit. And you're looking for somebody who can appreciate you for your growth and development and the work you've done. That's an equal. You're not looking for somebody, you know, oh, take care of me, rescue me, and, you know, and put me in a bit. You're looking for somebody who can respect you and honestly see you for who you are. And if they can't do that, next.
But Sharon, the other thing I want to add is this thing around intention and attention. And so I appreciate that we don't forget our history, because our, what you forget, it repeats itself. So we do want to be vigilant around that. However, I don't think we want to focus on that, because what you focus on, it keeps creating itself. So if we're trying to move beyond our history, all of that, slavery and feeling disempowered or disenfranchised, then what is our vision for culture? What is our vision for how we want to be in relationship with others? And then to create that vision and focus on speaking that vision, seeing that vision. The other vision don't even give room to, not easily done. I mean, I know I'm saying it, that's not easy to do, but that's the way forward, is to let go of those old beliefs and ideas and thoughts and stories and focus on our true north, which is our way forward. How do we?
That's something else that might be interesting. We've noticed that I noticed that young men, in particular African-American men, because we deal with all multicultural, diverse people, but young Black men, saying between the age of 30 and 40, were raised by their mothers, and they come looking for relationship training because they want skills and tools, because they do not want to repeat history again. And a lot of people are committed to making sure that they raise their family or be in a committed relationship consciously instead of unconscious. So we have them go through a series of assessments and a series of tests to make sure that they really realize, we're not saying a person you selected is good or bad, but you ought to know their FICO score before you get married. You ought to know what their paycheck is. And if they have a student loan debt, you want to find that out before you get married. If they don't own the house, you want to see the deed. Did they really graduate? So you got to really be serious and ask hard questions before you get in a relationship, because once you're in it, then it becomes more difficult to get out of it. So I've noticed that men are really like, I want to be a great father. And those men, when they say they're committed, I found that they are really committed, because they say, I do not want to have my children go through what I went through, and anything I can do to prevent that, I'm committed. And I mean, they seem to be consistently talking to each other, but I think they're changing things.
That's good. That's great. What is your prediction and what is your hope for love, in particular between Black couples, as well as for Black people in the broader world?
I got a couple of answers. One is that I personally see this truly is an alchemical process of a rebirth of relationships like we've never known them before. We've had more people, a straight woman wants to marry a gay guy, and that there's one of the articles we're sharing, in real life, and trying to work out the sexual issue. They're like, well, if you like men, and that means you don't like me, then how do you do, so, don't look over there for something that you don't have over here. And so I think it really might get people to a point where, it's about self-love, because when we can define who we are, then we have a better opportunity to choose. When you know better, you choose better. And I think that consciousness is going to, in an era where I think it's going to force us to really rethink what we're doing and the decisions we're making, and not just, it's all about love. Love, and you were talking about the Black love. First time I encountered a gay guy, when we were talking about the relationship training program, and he was saying, well, I was saying, he says, gay, we have issues in communicating just like everybody else. We're no different than everybody else. That was a long time ago. And by the time he got through explaining his relationship and what he was going through, I could have put Bobby, Bill's, Karen, Sarah, wouldn't have made any difference what the names were. They were going through the same issues. So I think that as we're going through this alchemical process of really just breaking things up, the mold of like, you're supposed to be married. Who said we're supposed to be married? Who made that up? In slavery, we were looking at uncles and different people taking care of the kids, because it was a community of people who took care of the kids. It wasn't just, this is my kid and I'm the only one that can talk to my kid. So I don't know how we're going to be in the future, But the common denominator for me is going to be self-awareness. It still is know thyself. Because if you don't know thyself, somebody else is going to tell you who you are. If we don't know ourselves as a culture, somebody else is going to define us to be what they think we should be. And then we're going to adapt to that because we haven't taken the time to identify what makes us tick and who we are. So what I think is happening is that more women going to graduate school and becoming doctors. And I think that women, of course, taking a PhD and just thinking about women are going to be the ones who are going to turn this around. And women are the ones who are going to change this because I think women are now coming into their own being and being powerful, being seen, and will not go back into the shadows and just act like, they don't exist. And that's going to force men to really step up to the plate because we haven't had to. We can go into a bar and ask 10 women and 2 of you are going to say yes. So until women get to say, none of us are going to go with you, then it's like, oh, I'm going to have to change my routine. Oh, I'm going to have to change my act because you allow us to really shape the narrative about how we treat you. And I think women are getting to the point where they realize that nobody's coming. It's up to them. And they're going to have to take responsibility for their lives and their actions. And a lot of them are not willing to settle. If that means you got to be by yourself for the rest of your life, love yourself and have the best life you can. But don't dumb yourself down and accept something less than what you deserve. And to that degree, I believe that is the hope that I see going forward. That Black women or women of color are just going to change culturally, life in this country and in the world, but also in relationships. And, long overdue. But that's where I see things going.
Mhm.
Thank you.
And for me, I think that we're already in a breakdown. So we're looking at breakdown, breakthrough. And I think in general, we're in a breakdown in culture, community, in relationships, in our relationship with ourselves. And wherever there is a breakdown, as I said, a breakthrough. So I'm thinking that my prediction is that we will continue to break down how we've been. And I've been doing a lot of reading and research around the age of Aquarius and the direction we're going in, because we're dropping the hierarchy of relationships and we're all moving into equanimity where we all matter, from the dog to the bird to the baby. Everybody has a voice in community, in families, and for people to be heard, seen, witnessed. That's important. So a whole other level of how to love. They're calling it 5-dimensional. People can go research that. Ability to love, because it really is about the larger community, the whole, the HOLE, because I am you, you are me. So to the degree I bring love to myself, I'm loving you. And so that's my prediction, that we will move into a different way of how we are with each other in love and in holding space, more compassion, more empathy, more understanding. And my hope is that my hope is that we wake up and take responsibility and recognize that the relationships we desire to have are creatable, doable, and it does require us to be mindful and responsible for the relationships we have and those that we're committed to.
You got a few seconds before it's over. And here's the other thing I would suggest is that everybody go buy our book.
You don't have it.
And you'll get some tip out of that book. I guarantee you that will make a difference in the way you see relationships.
Yes. Well, I was going to say that, Dr. Melvin, that what I like is that it's digestible, right? And that you have explained things that could be that are very complex in ways that people can understand and people can practice. So thank you for that work. Looking forward to definitely more work. So if we can take that with us, self-knowledge, we will be on the path. So thank you so much, Dr. Sherrie, Dr. Melvin.
You're welcome.
And thank you everyone who came today, who stayed till our ending. And I will look forward to sharing the link when I post it.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you
Good
for
night.
letting us. Bye, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.